So moving ahead to our agenda for the day, we'll start with some introductions from myself on behalf of JPAL MENA, and then introductions from AUC and from Community Jamil, before heading into two great panels focusing on really critical priority policy issues in the region. First, labor markets and the development of small, medium, and micro enterprises, hearing from JPAL researchers, AUC researchers, and partners in the Egyptian government. And then a second panel on pathways from social protection to livelihoods, featuring JPAL researchers and partners from the Sawiris Foundation for Social Development, before we shift to closing remarks and an opportunity to participate in Q&A with our speakers for today. So referring to Q&A, you'll see here on the screen a tiny URL to which you can submit your questions. So navigate to this URL and you'll be able to submit questions which we'll consolidate throughout the session, and we'll save time at the end for addressing the questions to our panelists. So now I'll go ahead and bring us into kick us off for our first session. I am Allison Fahey, and I'm the Interim Executive Director of JPAL Middle East and North Africa. And I'm really pleased to introduce JPAL to you today and to share how we use impact evaluation as a tool in the fight against poverty. As we all know, poverty is complex and persistent around the world and in MENA, where lagging educational outcomes, limited opportunities for girls and women, and persistently high unemployment rates pose really serious challenges. And these underlying development challenges are exacerbated by new major global issues. So conflict, of course, disrupts lives. The global COVID-19 pandemic we are all now experiencing strains our health systems and has led to a massive economic shock worldwide. And climate change threatens livelihoods and well-being. And all of those challenges affect the most vulnerable in our communities, who are the least prepared to weather those difficulties. But at the same time, there's kind of some hope to this story as well. In the face of these great challenges, innovations really abound. The NGO, philanthropic, and public and private sectors are creatively developing new ideas for tackling these challenges. And many of you on the call are probably the drivers of that innovation, and we as JPAL MENA really want to work together with you. So the question that drives us at JPAL is this: the challenges that we've just discussed are great, and the creative ideas that are out there are many, but how do we know what works to reduce poverty and what works to improve lives? And since we have limited resources and urgent crises that demand that we act now, we really need to know, what should we prioritize? What works and what should be scaled up to reach many more people and to help more effectively fight poverty? So this is where JPAL fits in. Our mission at JPAL is to reduce poverty by ensuring that policy is informed by rigorous evidence. Now, when I say that our mission focuses on using rigorous evidence, I mean something very specific. I mean a form of impact evaluation called a randomized evaluation. You may also hear this referred to as a randomized control trial or an RCT. Now, randomized evaluations take a scientific approach to fighting poverty by working together with partners to innovate new program and policy ideas, testing the impact of those new development programs and policies, and then scaling up effective solutions. And this approach has been celebrated at some of the highest levels. So for instance, JPAL's co-founders won the 2019 Nobel Prize in Economics for this experimental approach to fighting global poverty, and for the way that randomized evaluations have helped to inform policy change. So I'll tell you briefly about what a randomized evaluation is, and this is going to be a very quick overview. So my hope for today is that you'll just kind of get a bit of the intuition behind the approach to research that we take at JPAL. And if you want to know more, there are lots of online resources, and we'll soon be offering trainings in English and in Arabic online and eventually in person to understand how to design such evaluations. But for now, I'll walk through the intuition. So there are many types of impact evaluations, but JPAL does randomized evaluations. which are the most rigorous way to estimate the causal impact of a given program. And our affiliated professors specialize in conducting high-quality, policy-relevant randomized evaluations. So at the beginning of a program, let's say a business training program, we take all eligible businesses, indicated here by this kind of group of little, let's call them businesses, within the middle of the circle. And then we'll randomly assign this group of eligible businesses to two groups. For one of these groups, we'll roll out an intervention, a program. So let's say this is a business training program targeted at business owners. The other group will be the comparison group. So by virtue of randomly assigning all of these businesses to two groups, both groups will be the same on average in all observable and unobservable ways. So for instance, their business size and their revenues and profits on average will be the same. Similarly, things that are harder to detect, like talent and motivation and grit, will also on average be the same across both of these groups. So the only difference between the two groups is that one receives the business training program and the other does not. Over time, we'll measure outcomes in both of those groups. Let's say we'll measure business revenues and profits and the well-being of the business owner and her or his family members. And we can confidently say that the difference in outcomes between those two groups is caused by the business training program, or is the impact of that business training program. And so this is kind of the beauty of the randomized evaluation. So this is an approach that JPAL affiliated professors have taken together with partners around the world. And the way that we think about this is that we take a globally informed and a locally grounded approach. Our network of affiliated professors includes some of the world's top development economists and political scientists who work closely with local practitioners, with researchers, and with our regional office-based staff. And together, these partnerships have led more than 1,000 randomized evaluations of development programs. And you can see on the map here, each dot represents an individual evaluation. So a question about the effectiveness of a development program or policy that we've evaluated together. What you'll also see on the screen is that JPAL has a network of now 7 regional offices based at top universities around the world. And these regional offices play a really key role in building these partnerships, driving new research, and supporting the use of evidence, which altogether have led to the scale up of effective programs to reach more than 400 million people worldwide. And we are absolutely thrilled to be launching our newest regional office, JPAL MENA, at AUC to deepen this approach within the MENA region. So this new regional office, JPAL MENA at AUC, is actually built on a really rich history of collaboration within the region and collaboration with AUC. So far, there are nearly 30 completed and ongoing studies in Egypt and 8 other MENA countries. And while the examples that we'll share in today's panels are from Egypt, there's actually a great deal of work from other countries with NGOs, governments, and private sector partners focusing on a range of priority issues, from cash transfers to job training and firm growth to social protection, health, and education. And I'll give you an example of how research in the region is generating useful insights to help inform policy decisions. So this example comes from work with one of our partners that's on the line today for the Sawiris Foundation. So when facing the challenges of youth unemployment in the region, many of us grapple with the question of, well, what could help young people to start businesses? For instance, does lack of access to capital prevent them opening businesses? And a question JPAL affiliates and partners at Sawiris Foundation and 3 NGOs in MENA asked was, does providing young people with capital assistance help them to start businesses? And what are the impacts of different forms of such assistance, say cash, in-kind assets, or loans? So when young people applied to the NGOs for a loan, they were randomly assigned to one of 4 groups to receive a loan, cash grant, or an in-kind grant, or a comparison group. And what we found is that capital assistance can be an effective tool for spurring business activity in Upper Egypt. In particular, a really notable and interesting and important result from this study is that access to all forms of capital assistance improved business outcomes for women, suggesting that programs in Upper Egypt that increase access to capital could help women to open profitable businesses and increase their earnings. And this is unique relative to results of similar evaluations in other settings, pointing to the importance of conducting new research in the MENA region. So finally, I'll wrap up with a few notes looking ahead. So as we look forward, JPAL MENA at AUC will prioritize work in 3 areas. We will be setting a research agenda, which we would love all of your input on, to help guide what questions are the most important for new impact evaluations in the region. Where is evidence the most urgently needed? We plan to focus on climate change, gender, humanitarian assistance, education, health, social protection, jobs, and private sector development. But within those areas, what are the really urgent and pressing questions? Second, we want to work with a broader group of strategic partners in government, NGOs, and philanthropy to support you to apply lessons from the global evidence base to inform your programs and policies. And third, we'll deliver capacity building programs focused on how to generate and use evidence and to go much deeper than the brief single slide summary that I gave you earlier. So we really look forward to getting to work at JPAL MENA at AUC, and we hope to be able to work with many of you. So at this point, I will hand it over to our next panelist, Dr. Samer Atella, who is the Associate Dean for Graduate Studies and Research at the American University in Cairo School of Business. Samer?
Thank you, Alison. I'm very delighted to join dear colleagues and friends today in this important milestone. To reach this milestone, a lot of dedicated people have worked tirelessly for many years. I want to congratulate the team at JPAL, at MIT, and my colleagues at the AUC School of Business. I'm also very appreciative of the support that Community Jameel has given us, a support without which we would not have been here today. It's unfortunate that we are not physically together to congratulate each other while firmly shaking hands. Still, this is a moment to celebrate and to enjoy. The great work that JPAL at AUC has done in the past years is a stepping stone for a larger, more impactful agenda. Today, the launch of JPAL MENA at AUC comes at a much needed time to guide policy in this part of the world. The pandemic has put the region's economy through a grueling experience. Over the short period of time, governments had to put brakes on the economic activity and deprive millions of generating income and actually surviving. It has put to the test an ailing medical system across the region. It is true that the pandemic has affected all segments of the society, but it's also true that its pains fall more on the poor. I believe that our partnership is a perfect fit to address these critical challenges post-COVID world. In my view, there are 3 equally important areas of research and policy advice that JPAL can complement the existing body of academic research and guide policy in the region and build capacity within its network of stakeholders. In my view, the first critical priority or first priority is advocating evidence-based policymaking. We are in a region where the scarcity of data and evidence is hindering informed policy formulation. JPAL at AUC has gained a lot of credibility with several governmental entities in Egypt. I look forward to these strong linkages with other governmental and non-governmental entities across the region through the capacity building and training arm of JPAL MENA at AUC. In my view, the second priority is to develop a research agenda on equitable and affordable provision of healthcare. There's a lot in this region that we can use and learn from the research that JPAL has produced globally on health. We need to know more on the effect of non-state actors on the provision of health services, or the policies that government and non-government entities can adopt so that these parties can deliver equitable services to marginalized communities, especially in areas that don't have any sort of medical services or access to any sort of medical services. What are the innovative mechanisms to ensure the uninsured and to reduce the out-of-pocket payments for healthcare, especially for the poor? but this is obviously came to the test after the COVID-19, and we've seen how much we need to reformulate and use the research that is out there and develop newer research here in the region about the provision of healthcare. Lastly, but not least, the pandemic exacerbated the vulnerability of the poor. We've seen how a lot of poor people were out of their jobs because of the lockdown measures in a lot of countries, and it affected their livelihood and their consumption. And the new recent data by the CAPMAS indicates a severe impact of these measures on a lot of the marginalized communities in Egypt, but also I suspect in a lot of the countries in the region. The complete absence of social nets and protection programs should no longer be an accepted reality in the region. The types of shocks that our economies face commands that government develop policies that provide sufficient support to a wider segments and a larger support to them. The research that JPAL has done in the world and what has been done so far, as you will see later today in the panels with the team at AUC, sheds lots of positive insights on the working of the labor market in Egypt and in other areas outside of the region and in the region. We need to transform this research into constructive policy solutions for Egypt and for the region. We need to learn more on how to impact positively the small and medium enterprises and to protect them from the shocks that are unrelated to their business. The challenges that are facing the region cannot be discussed in a 1 hour webinar and or a 1 week conferences. Unfortunately, the region suffers from multiple challenges in a very turbulent environment. The good news that these challenges bring opportunities. This is a new partnership that opens a big venue for opportunities to tackle these challenges. There is a lot to be discussed, there is a lot to be planned, there is a lot to be talked about, but I'm afraid I'm running out of time. I'm delighted at the end of this to introduce our next speaker, who is representing Community Jameel, Ms. Amna Fatani. She's the Assistant Director of Policy and Outreach in Community Jameel. Amna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Samir, and thank you to everyone joining us today. Community Jameel is really proud to have partnered with the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab at MIT since 2005, and today we're even more delighted to collaborate once more for the launch of JPAL MENA at the American University in Cairo. At Community Jameel, we view evidence as a crucial enabler and really one of our core tenets in our mission of innovating for a better future. We really try to focus on the evidence, on the action that evidence drives by supporting decision makers to apply the learnings from evidence to scale up effective interventions around the world. And we primarily do that through JPAL as the primary vehicle. The evidence that JPAL has created from over the 1,000 randomized evaluations has really changed how we address problems related to poverty. JPAL has, of course, pioneered this Nobel Prize-winning approach of using rigorous evidence to inform policy making. And today, policymakers, practitioners, and funders are increasingly applying this approach in their social policies and programs. We're proud to be able to support JPAL as it expands its presence in MENA, but it gives us even greater pleasure that JPAL MENA will be based at the American University in Cairo. It's an institution with which the Jameel family has a long-standing relationship, continued today by Community Jameel. Just to give a little bit of a background on our history with the American University in Cairo, in 1982, the Jameel family created the Abdul Latif Jameel Endowed Chair of Entrepreneurship and founded the Abdul Latif Jameel Center for Middle East Management Studies. The center is a powerful work of modernist architecture in the heart of the old American University in Cairo campus in Tahrir Square. The center, which opened its doors in 1989, was the focus of AUC's business and management programs. In 2018, AUC moved from Tahrir to a new campus in New Cairo, but the School of Business found a new home in the Abdul Latif Jameel Hall under the leadership of Professor Ayman Ismail, the Jameel Chair of Entrepreneurship. And in 2003, the old AUC campus in Tahrir was reborn as the Greek campus, a hub for entrepreneurship with the Jameel Center, replete with a creative space on its roof. at its heart. That blend of creativity and entrepreneurship really captures the spirit of Community Jameel, and we're really glad to see that now with JPAL, MENA based at AUC, that we're kind of bringing the full circle together. Taking a more broader view, it is vital and timely that we are launching JPAL in the MENA region. As you all know, today, conflict, climate change, and the COVID-19 pandemic heighten already urgent development priorities in the region. JPAL's dedication to working with humanitarian organizations, the governments, and NGOs to really generate the evidence and scale up the effective interventions that improve the lives of vulnerable populations in MENA is more critical than ever. This region has great challenges, but also great opportunities, and we believe that with JPAL MENA and its partners, we hope to promote the culture of evidence in action. Thank you. Over to you, Alison.
Great, thank you so much, Amna, and thanks, Samer. Before opening up for our next panel, I also want to reiterate some of what Amna has just said. The Jameel family and Community Jameel have been longtime collaborators with JPAL going back to 2003. And JPAL is tremendously kind of grateful and proud and excited to be able to collaborate together on the launch of this newest regional office. So it's a tremendous team bringing together AUC, JPAL, and Community Jameel. So we're really grateful for the support to make that happen. Now, we'll shift into the first panel of the day about supporting small business and creating employment opportunities to tackle some of the region's challenges. And first, I'll hand it over to Bruno Crepon, a co-scientific director of JPAL MENA and a professor of economics at NCI in Paris. Bruno, over to you.
So it is a great pleasure to present you an example of the type of work that we are doing. Next slide. As Alison mentioned, JPAL MENA prioritizes policy issues that are important to MENA governments. Our research is to a large extent driven by policymakers in the region, and it is informed by the most pressing challenges and innovations that need to be tested in the region. As we all know, and as shown in the graph, one of the most pressing challenges is youth unemployment, and especially female youth unemployment. We also know that those challenges are now deepened by the current health crisis. And from IMF forecasts also shown in the graph, the downward pressure is likely to last. Now more than ever, it is important to test innovative interventions to inform economic policy choices. And the returns are large. Actually, as Alison has already discussed, one general lesson we have obtained from our experiments so far is that the returns to interventions for young women are very large. Next slide. To address those challenges, it is important to consider the potential root causes of youth unemployment. And there are many possible ones. It is common to cite labor market frictions due to ineffective job search strategies, as well as skill gaps and geographical gaps. But there are other potential causes, such as the weak labor demand and frictions in the hiring procedure on firm side. And of course, there are the barriers to self-employment. For example, the lack of access to funding or the lack of business skills. Many costly programs of the labor market have been designed to address those causes of youth unemployment. Next slide. But how can we know which of those root causes is most prevalent? And once we know that, how can we design a solution that tackles this root cause? And finally, how do we know whether that solution works? Consider, for example, labor market frictions. Are they related to a lack of information about existing opportunities, or to the cost of job search, or to the inability of youth to signal their skills? To answer all of those important questions, we want to work with partners and go in the field to understand in details how programs work and the economics of how they address the root causes so as to improve the economic response. Next slide. We have already started to develop such a partnership model in the region. This is the case in Egypt, where we have been present for several years now, but this is also true for other countries. For example, in Morocco, where we have just started a large program to develop the culture of evidence-based policy. In Egypt, one of our first partners was MS MEDA, the Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency. This is the government agency in Egypt that focuses on promoting and developing the capacity of SMEs. This agency has been working with us since we started running randomized evaluations in the region. We have worked with them on several projects and already got exciting results. For example, about job training programs and gender issues, or about labor market friction and the impact of delivering information about job opportunities. Mona Said will tell more about it. And we are currently working on developing more projects with MENA, for example, one focusing on migration. MENA has been a great partner when it comes to evidence generation and evidence use. It has been such a big luck for us to find a partner like MENA on our way. Our hope is that this joint effort will help MENA to design effective interventions. And we also ambition that it will contribute to the global effort in the region towards more innovative interventions. It is now my pleasure to introduce Mona Said. Mona is a professor in the Department of Economics at AUC, and she is a co-PI in a study on labor market frictions. Mona has been one of our earlier academic partners in the region, and here also it has been a great luck for us to work with her. Thank you, Mona, for joining us today.
Thank you, Bruno, for this very kind introduction. In fact, as a labor economist and academic at AUC and in Egypt, I've always been looking for ways in which my research and my work can be both rigorous and impactful, and for a way also to bring my research findings into the class to my students at AUC of labor economics, of economic development in the Middle East, to make their experience unique and ignite their passion for particularly studying issues of socioeconomic relevance to the MENA region. And that is why my involvement in this particular project that Bruno mentioned about job fairs in Egypt was an opportunity to address all of those issues at once for me. If we kind of try to put that project in context, so in fact, the current times of crisis, when we're just beginning to see the effect of COVID-19 in our path towards recovery, it's important for us to find opportunities that can help us better understand programs that work. We scale them up, and we try to hopefully make them positively impact those who are most in need during those times. So the project specifically looked at the impact of providing information about job fairs, wages of those jobs that are offered in job fairs, and how decent they are in terms of good quality jobs that have a bunch of non-wage aspects that are attractive to workers, as well as transport subsidies offered to potential attendees of job fairs, and seeing whether those things combined or separately can increase attendance and ultimately job matching between potential job seekers and employers. What is interesting about our project, of course, is that it aligns with one of the root causes of unemployment in Egypt and the MENA region, which is structural unemployment. If we put it in just a small phrase, it's a problem of youth and new graduate educated workers or youth insertion in the labor market. That's the main problem of unemployment as identified by research. So we're looking at whether the constraint for job seekers to attend those job fairs and benefit from them is a lack of information about the wage and the quality of jobs, how decent the jobs are, as I said, or the financial constraint. We need to provide them, let's say, with a voucher that will allow them to arrive there without incurring the transportation cost, which might be high for them. So our target beneficiaries, and I should stress that, are blue-collar and clerical workers, because we know that there are a lot of job fairs that are usually for white-collar workers. In fact, they're run in the universities themselves, including AUC or Cairo University or Ain Shams University. But what is less common is to run those job fairs for blue-collar and clerical workers. And those workers are then randomly assigned into a different intervention, either given information on job fairs, wages or quality of jobs, or a transportation voucher, or both. These job fairs were run with partners who we are very grateful to work with, such as the online job matching platform Shagalni, and a private also provider, Job Master, are two of our partners. Now, while our results are still very preliminary, we are getting some clear results already that it is the financial constraint that is more important for job seekers. And even though information matters, it is of a smaller magnitude. However, along the way, we were able to discover some illuminating insights about the job seekers' beliefs and expectations, and how they differ from the reality, and how that influences their job seeking practice. So we're able to think about what interventions can be introduced to align those expectations with reality and hopefully result in more effective job seeking. For example, in the figure you have here, we can see a clear gender differential in the expectations of wages at the fair that can affect also their attendance differentially. While men seem to have a good understanding of the type of wages offered at the fair, women don't have exactly that same alignment. So more than 25% of women seem to expect that wages offered at the fair are below the range of the actual wages offered, whereas it seems a bit more, just a bit more than 10% for males. So this explains why we might see stronger impacts for women of providing them with the right information, as opposed to men. So that was, an example of how we can cater our interventions to take account of gender, for example. And this is something we can only find in a context like this. Next, I just want to talk a little bit about, why by working with JPAL, I felt that I felt really dedicated to this rigorous research methodology and to continue with this work. First of all, number one for me was the importance, and I know it very clearly, of collecting high quality data, but also collecting it while very high ethical standards of research are adhered to. And that I saw very clearly throughout my work with JPAL. They have a comprehensive, for example, list of minimum must-dos and don'ts that ensure that the primary data collection that they do remains of high quality at the researchers and data collector level, but also respecting the ethics and the anonymity of those whose data is being collected from. With the principal investigators also who lead the research, they're expected to complete a pre-analysis plan that explains precisely how the researchers are planning to analyze the data in advance of seeing the data, which adds a lot of transparency and accountability to the way the data is analyzed and collected. So the joke that if you torture the data long enough, it shall confess is really avoided with this type of ethics in this type of research. Secondly, what really had a positive impact on me personally as a researcher working with JPAL was actually meeting one of JPAL's founders, Abhijit Banerjee, at AUC in a talk he gave in 2017. And this was before he won the Nobel Prize, along with Esther Duflo and Michael Kramer. And I had the honor and the pleasure to introduce him to this talk organized by our department and our school. He shared really the importance, among other insights, of leaving the office and going to the field in order to understand how programs work and what programs work and programs don't, especially that we're dealing with the lives of the poor, and their lives matter and deserve to be looked at closely. And we learn so much by doing that, as opposed to the standard way of academics of formulating theories and just staring at the data without actually having that very close contact. So this simple message was very powerful takeaway for me, and I believe to many of my students who attended, positively influencing my interest in this research. And we followed up actually at the economics department of AUC by setting up impact evaluation modules at our graduate classes, and we carried on with our adding experiential learning in our practicum component of master's programs, some of them in association with JPAL. We also had several attendees for this talk from outside AUC, from other research institutions, who I'm sure will influence in a similar way. So obviously, we were very pleased in Egypt, all those who met and worked with JPAL, met Abhijit and met with JPAL, you know, with the Nobel Prize win, which we felt was very well deserved. Finally, one important message I got from JPAL's work is that this type of groundwork or field work that takes you almost to the back alleys and villages where the poor live is, you know, its importance cannot be overemphasized. Because even though it might be now challenging in the times we're living in, but in fact, it doesn't have to mean physical contact, but what it means is to have direct contact with the subject of your research and finding ways of directly hearing their voices. For example, we know that a turning point in feminist research is when women's voices were heard rather than the voices of academics, both men and women, who are writing just academically about it. So it's the same about writing about poverty, about labor market issues and job matching. And we must hear the voices of our subject matters that we're working with. And this is done through a lot of our work also in association with JPAL, collecting primary data, both through rigorous methods and at the same time not undermining the importance, and I quite like that, of qualitative work and in-depth research conducted during the needs assessment. The work that we're doing has many important, I think, impacts. One of them is, of course, it will influence policy in several ways. Firstly, as I mentioned, we can contribute to high quality data that is based on the priorities of MENA governments themselves, because more often than not, we have partners from the government and we get the calling for the research we're doing from their needs. Secondly, through learning about the rigorous methodologies, through trainings offered by JPAL, executive education and others, we can embrace the culture of rigorous methodologies. So for students interested in building this knowledge, JPAL and MIT and AUC Economics Department got together to offer a micromaster through edX that help you learn about analyzing data and running randomized evaluations. We are partners with MIT and JPAL in the sense that taking those modules can count towards our master's degree also, but this is of course courses that are run by MIT and JPAL. And finally, through taking this evidence and directly communicating it with policymakers, we can help make them better, help them to make better decisions that focus on more cost-effective programs. As Bruno has mentioned, without dedicated partners who were committed and involved with us from the very first start of our research, we would not have been able to reach where we are today. The full circle goes back to them with our results, sharing it with them to see what makes sense and how useful it is for them. And for that, I have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Madhat Masoud, head of the Human and Community Development Central Sector at MENA, the Micro, Small, Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Egypt. He's a prime example of how policymakers can be driving forces and effective partners in this work. Without further ado, to you, Mr. Madhat Masoud. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. First, I would like to thank the whole JPAL team for giving me this great opportunity to talk in this important webinar and present the Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprise Development Agency, MENA, point of view, touching on almost the same issues that have the previous speakers gone through, yet from the other side of the coin. Let me first give you a very quick background introduction on MENA. MENA is a semi-governmental organization recognized as the National Apex Institution mandated to place the micro, small, and medium enterprise and entrepreneurs at the heart of the sustainable socio-economic development. To make the MSMEs and entrepreneurship business environment more conducive and the entrepreneurship growth by producing and disseminating knowledge and tools, increasing the efficiency and supporting the ecosystem and fostering the innovative and integrated responses. MENA is concerned with the development of SMEs and entrepreneurship, either directly or through the coordination of all efforts of all parties and civil society association initiatives in the field of these projects. as you all know, MENA replaced the Social Fund for Development, established since 1991, and is directly affiliated to the Office of the Prime Minister, thus becoming the product of the accumulated experience of 29 years in providing employment opportunities, poverty mitigation, creating an enabling environment for the small and micro enterprises, and human development programs. In addition to the labor-intensive public projects that have effectively contributed to the improving of the living standards of citizens, and is providing this enable environment for the growth of the MSMEs. The MENA supported the young people transition to employment while building the evidence based on youth employment program in Egypt. One of the latest successful implemented programs is the Emergency Employment Investment Project, the EAP, that was implemented between 2014 and 2017 with a budget of almost 67 million euros, financed by a generous grant from the European Union with the administration of the World Bank. The project consisted of mainly three main components. The first component was the small-scale labor-intensive infrastructure sub-project. The second was the labor-intensive community services sub-projects. And the third component was the enhancing the youth employability program. This program aims to contribute to the reduction of the negative impact of any economic crisis that may lead to the impact of food insecurity, unemployment of the poor and vulnerable in the targeted areas, and also to support the protection and building of community assets in poor communities. It does so by providing short and long-term employment opportunities for unemployed, unskilled, and semi-skilled workers, by supporting locally generated sub-projects such as community-level infrastructure construction or upgrading, or community services to be proposed by the local government and the non-governmental organizations that support youth with different skills to avail the permanent job opportunities. An impact evaluation took place during the implementation, where the goal was to identify and evaluate the approaches to facilitate young people transition to work and contribute to building the evidence based on youth employment programming in Egypt, in addition to providing scientific evidence of the effects of the cash for work activities and infrastructure created on the socioeconomic welfare of the beneficiary household and communities. If you want to say why MENA think that the impact assessment is important, I think for an organization like MENA, ensuring the evidence and the effectiveness of the employment interventions and enhancing labor market outcomes for youth in Egypt is one of the most important elements. Also, filling the gap by investigating which intervention package is more effective at improving employment outcomes, and the extent to which a combination of different forms of intervention could be more successful strategy in dealing with the issue of unemployment. Also, to be sure that all the employment services and training provided through the program to the beneficiary were effective, and to understand more about which component of the intervention drives the results, or if any additional intervention would lead to better labor market outcomes. Also, the impact of the interventions on women, on youth, not only the employment outcome in itself, but also relevant outcome gained from it, like the capacity building, the women empowerment, and the ownership. And I think the impact study that the results of the impact study showed a lot of lessons learned regarding this issue. Also, this impact study assisted mass media in its ongoing fundraising efforts for the product of the labor-intensive concept among donors and also among line ministries within the country. If you also want to say why mass media decided to partner with JPAL, I think JPAL is a well-known organization that disseminates the research results to governments, donors, and partners to institutionalize the learning from evidence. And I think this is a very important issue here. Also, the impact of the social programs and policy teams covering a wide range of sectors, including social protection, employment, education, and gender, and giving this kind of training to policy makers. Also, mass media has just started the implementation of a new operation in the field of combating the illegal migration. And I think this also would be a new venue to test these kind of programs. I think also part of the lessons learned that were outcome of these studies is that conducting an impact evaluation is possible even for smaller organizations. We did that with local NGOs within the program. Also, the impact of the intervention on gender and participants were more clearer. Also, impacts on non-labor market outcomes like the female empowerment was also evident. The effect of training, employment support on the labor market outcomes of youth. These kind of outputs and lessons learned were also evident from the study. Also,
thanks so much, Medhat. I don't mean to jump in, but I want to just give you a quick couple of seconds to wrap up so that we can shift to our next panel.
Okay. I think also there is still much to learn about how to optimize the design and the delivery of the program. What I would like finally to say that the results of the impact assessed mass media to promote for the labor-intensive concept. Also, the importance of having a baseline survey and end line to be able to measure the real impact. And lastly, but not the least, using the randomization and the RCT as a tool to guarantee transparency and equal opportunities for the beneficiaries in the selection process. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Medhat, and thanks to all of our panelists. Great to hear kind of the ways that we're thinking about generating rigorous evidence to address questions in the labor market space and tackling youth unemployment. Now we'll shift gears to our second panel, looking at a different kind of development question, which is around thinking about social protection programs and policies for the most vulnerable and pathways to make beneficiaries of those programs kind of engage in sustainable livelihoods. So here I'm pleased to introduce Adam Osman, JPAL Co-Scientific Director for the MENA region and a Professor of Economics at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Adam, over to you.
Great, thanks Allison, and thanks everybody for being here. So today I'm just going to talk very quickly about social protection. So, when we think about social protection, what we're really thinking about is what are the best ways to help the poorest families. And, usually, charitable organizations and governments really want to help the poor, but they have limited funds. And so there are these big operational questions about, how do we know who needs the most help? How do we know what kind of help they need, and how much help should we give them? So these are just, basic questions that, oftentimes don't have a lot of evidence backing them up. And usually we're just going off of people's, thoughts and preferences, or their hunches about what it is that needs to get done. So we're just going to talk very quickly about two studies, that, one that's been completed and one that is ongoing, that we've done in the MENA region about these issues. One was completed in Morocco, and it was focused on looking at simple changes in implementation of a transfer that was meant to go to poor families to encourage them to send their children to school. And so what they did there was they had some groups where the money was a conditional cash transfer, in that it was focused on, if you send your kids to school and we can make sure that you did, then we'll give you money. The other one was called a labeled cash transfer, which gave money to everybody, but when they gave them money, they said, look, this money is meant to, have you send your kids to school. And of course, the second way is much simpler. Doesn't have to, the government doesn't have to worry about the machinery necessary to make sure that people, sent their kids to school. And it ended up working better and allowed people to access the money easier, and it still ended up sending kids to school. The second study is one that we're implementing now with the Sawiris Foundation, where we're testing a lot of things in that study, but just one of the issues that I want to highlight is this issue of how much support do we need to give people. So for instance, say, an organization has enough money to provide, $1,000 worth of support to 100 families. They could also use that money to, say, provide $500 of support to 200 families. Or, $250 of support to 400 families. So the question is, for each of the different amounts that we give people, we're going to most likely help them more. But if we give them less, maybe we could help more people. So this is one of the questions that we're trying to overcome, or trying to answer with the help of in line with the Sawiris Foundation, in an experiment that's ongoing right now in Sohag and Asyut. And so these are some questions, but there's many, many more questions out there that don't have answers. A lot of these are seem to be straightforward operational questions, but also have a lot of science and a lot of economics behind it that really allow professors and researchers to get very excited and lead to policy insights that can then hopefully improve the effectiveness of programs implemented by NGOs and by governments and other organizations. So that's it for me, and I'm very excited to introduce Noura Salim, who's been with us for years, is the executive director of the Sawiris Foundation, and we'll take it from here.
Thank you very much, Adam. And it's a pleasure to be with you all today. And I guess at the beginning, just congratulations to all of us as practitioners, academics, policymakers, for the official launch of the JPAL MENA office in collaboration with AUC. And I want to perhaps first introduce the Sawiris Foundation to give context, and then talk briefly about why for Sawiris Foundation partnering with JPAL was very important and why we initiated that collaboration several years ago. So Sawiris Foundation is a grant-making foundation set up in Egypt for 20 years. We focus on economic empowerment as well as education and social empowerment. So it is quite a wide scope. Basically, I would say when we look at philanthropy, and I don't want to just say in Egypt and the Middle East, but perhaps more pronounced in Egypt and the Middle East, I think we see a lot of programs that, as Adam pointed out, I think as Engineer Midhat pointed out, are based on, intuition, are based perhaps on some past experience, are based on definitely very good intentions, but have very little when it comes to the actual impact or really any evidence to state how the program went. And even as I look at Sawiris Foundation and looking at a history of 20 years, we could come and tell you that, we have contributed to the employment of X number of people, or that we have supported, X thousand of students get a scholarship. But when you really dig deep to ask the tougher questions around, how many of those people have actually, how much have you impacted their economic livelihood? What are the secondary effects for this family in terms of children's health or children's education? How much of these results have even sustained beyond the end of the program? We would find that we don't have any answers to really any of those questions. And I think us and many other organizations, small and big, tend to be very much focused on process. How did the project go? How was the grant spent? Did we reach the number of people we targeted? But there's very little to say, how much change has actually happened. And for us, that was very important as a grant maker to basically then say, how can we get the biggest bang for our buck? How can we benefit the largest number of people? How can we ensure that the change we're making is actually sustainable? And I think this has been within the context of a lot of organizations similar to Sawiris Foundation, really looking at philanthropy and saying, philanthropy and grant making is a science. It is not just charity, and it's not just giving out food subsidies, as good as these may be and as important as these may be. But development is a science like anything else, like a corporate, where you would have to talk about certain key performance indicators, report, be very rigorous in what you do. Philanthropy is not any different, and development should not be any different. So with that, we started our collaboration with JPAL, looking at a number of our employment programs, asking questions, and I'll just state some examples, but asking questions like, should we be giving loans or should we be giving grants? Should we be giving in-kind loans or should we be giving in-kind loans, or should we be giving basically cash loans, right? So there were many questions that initiated our collaboration, and it has grown to address other questions that Adam pointed out. And as I step back and I say, would we do this again, and would we continue to do it? I would say absolutely, because I think this kind of research really helps us tailor our future programs, improve our programs. We set out with one question, but there are always a lot of things that you learn along the way that perhaps were not even set out in the research design. Why is it difficult for a lot of organizations to adopt this? It is because research tends to be timely, tends to be expensive. So I also realize, the limitations for other organizations, but I would definitely encourage particularly grant-making organizations to definitely support, their NGO partners, their implementing partners in ensuring that this budget that is going to research, or this time that is going to research, is as important as the time and the funds that are going to the beneficiaries, because ultimately you will never know if what you're doing and the funds you're spending are effective if you are not doing this. Otherwise, it is, like many great annual reports of many development organizations, very nice pictures of lots of children that seem a bit happier, but do you really know how much change you have made? And I think this is a very important question for us as development organizations. And for us, the research, and I'll end with that, the research that we do with Sawiris Foundation and JPAL is not for Sawiris Foundation. The idea and the hope is that we really hope that this can be questions that are relevant to other organizations, questions that are relevant for government, and thus that our research can benefit others, as we have also benefited from a lot of existing research that JPAL had already done, and have taken some of this research and sort of integrated it as we think about our programs, and have designed a new program that we're now researching with JPAL, but it was really designed off of a lot of research and an RCT that was done to look particularly at a program targeting the ultra poor. And with that, I thank you very much, and back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Nora and Adam, for that great overview of some of our collaborations in social protection with the Sawiris Foundation. Next, I'll hand it over to Abdurrahman Nagy, who is the Associate Director of Research for JPAL MENA, who will talk about ways to collaborate, looking ahead, and then we'll segue into question and answer to about 4:15 Cairo time. So we'll go for another 10 minutes for those of you who are still with us. Thanks so much.
Great. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. All set, Abdurrahman.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Alison, for making the introduction. I would like to start by saying that I'm very thrilled and honored and happy that we have now the MENA office for JPAL at the American University in Cairo. So I assume by now you know more about the type of work that the Abdulatif Jameel Poverty Action Lab could do, or what we did over the last 5 years in cooperation with our partners from the government side and non-governmental partners as well. So the question now is, how can we work together in MENA? So in MENA, we are developing our work in 3 main areas: research, policy, and training. So please allow me to walk you through each of these pillars. And for sure, if you are a donor, there are plenty of opportunities to support this type of work. The MENA region needs rigorous research that informs what works and what does not work, and how we can find cost-effective solution to our challenges is very highly needed in our context. This is also a great area for internal researchers and implementing organizations who are interested in evaluating the program to work with JPAL on evaluating innovative solutions in the MENA region. With this research, we can generate policy insights that can inform program designs. So please reach out to us if you are interested in supporting our working on bridging research with policy, or sharing our findings with government to make better decisions based on rigorous evidence that we generated using our work in Egypt, the MENA region, or across the world. And finally, our work does not stop at research and policy. We are looking to bring in more and more users of evidence who can translate it to action through practice in the field. So please, again, all executive and practitioners, reach out to us if you would like to learn more on how to use evidence in your work and in practice. So again, I would like to thank Community Jameel for their continued support for JPAL and for making the dream of JPAL MENA office a reality. And we are really hoping that this office will be supporting policymakers, practitioners, and the development organization in making their work better and make the best use of the limited resources that we have in our countries. So now I'll move more into the research questions, and actually I'll start by asking our panelists today the questions that we received from our participants. Actually, we are very delighted that we received a lot of questions, but let me highlight a few of them since we are behind our time already. So first question is actually for you, Alison. So, first of all, I would like just to ask all of you guys, just please do your best to make your answer as short as possible to cover as much as possible questions that we receive from our participants. So given the focus in the MENA region, Alison, and social, given our focus in, sorry, apologize. Hello.
I think I have the question on chat, so I'd be happy to jump in with this one. I can read the question while you're getting the next ones queued up.
Yeah, yeah. So very quickly, Alison. So given the focus is the MENA region on social protection mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, it would be interesting to see more research on the integration of migrants and refugees within the national social protection systems, and also studying other innovative approaches for social inclusion with their host communities. What are the next steps for JPAL to explore this space. And apologize for the technical issue.
No worries. That's a great question. Thanks. And I'll encourage all of our other panelists to switch on your videos now so that it feels a little bit more like we're in a live panel in person as we address Q&A. So excellent question around social protection and issues facing refugees and host communities. This is a real priority issue for JPAL MENA. In fact, it's already an area where there's existing research taking place. Some that's ongoing, some that's completed in Iraq, in Lebanon, and in Jordan in particular, looking at issues of social integration among groups, and in southern Turkey as well as with Syrian researchers, excuse me. So social integration among groups and integration in kind of social programs. So for instance, there's research with the integration of Syrian children in Turkish primary schools in southern Turkey that finds that introducing a pedagogical approach that kind of engages differently with children helps to reduce kind of conflict in the classroom and improves learning outcomes. There's also research that having sort of social contact through soccer game kind of mixed religion teams in Iraq helps to increase kind of positive and pro-social feelings about members of other religious groups. So this is a huge kind of existing area of priority for our researchers. We are hoping to launch what we refer to as a research initiative, a whole portfolio of research that will focus on humanitarian issues, and in particular, kind of integration of refugees and host communities within the region. So that's a major priority for us. If there are kind of implementing organizations working on those issues, reach out to us. We'd love to identify opportunities to start new research. And if there are donors who are interested in supporting some of that work, we would love to kind of be able to bring you on board to build this new research fund working on humanitarian issues. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Arsis. This is very informative. So the second question actually we received is for Engineer Midhat, and it's about how can JPAL work allow the governments in MENA to make better policy decisions in the face of COVID-19?
I think, Abdurrahman, the collaboration between JPAL and the government and any government and institution like Ms. Mida, like Ministry of Social Solidarity. I think this has proved to have a big impact on different programs. I think we started our collaboration in the impact that was done for enhancing employment opportunities for youth. And I think also during the coming years, we'll have this, the other impact evaluation regarding the illegal migration activities.
Thank you so much, Mr. Engineer Midhat, for your response. Actually, we are very delighted and honored to have this collaboration with Ms. Mida, and we are hoping to continue working with you and to provide more and more rigorous evidence that could be helpful for overcoming the challenges that are arising as a result of the COVID-19. So my next question is actually for Professor Bruno and Engineer Midhat again. It's more about how much does supporting micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises enrich the business ecosystem? How effective has supporting poor communities in previous interventions to establish micro and small-sized businesses been in reducing unemployment and poverty?
Adam, sorry, can you repeat the question, Abderrahman?
Yeah, sure. So how much does supporting micro, small, and the medium-sized enterprises enrich the business ecosystem? That's the first question. The second one is, how effective has supporting poor communities in previous intervention to establish micro and small-sized business been in reducing unemployment and poverty?
So I think that it's important to for each each question to go in the details and to understand precisely what the needs are, and to identify what are the barriers for example, small firms to develop their business. For example, if there are new opportunities which are created, there might be many barriers that exist for firms to access those opportunities. And this requires firms to change and to adapt to a new setting. And this process might involve several barriers for them. And so understanding those barriers is also a way to think about how to propose interventions that will help them to address those barriers. There was, for example, a very interesting study that has been done here in Egypt, which was about how to help firm reaching the export market. So Adam Osman has done this study, and actually it was very, maybe he could talk better than me about it, but the reaching the export markets necessitated for firms to do a lot of efforts, a lot of changes within their firms. And so the study was about how firms were able to make all those changes when they were offered to participate in this export market.
Thank you so much, Bruno. Engineer Midhat, would you like to add more to this?
I think what I fully agree with what Bruno has said, that this study for studying how could the Egyptian firms increase their or enter into the export market. I think this is something that is really needed. Also, there is another issue that these kind of studies, I don't think they are available, and I think that there is the market is indeed in need of these kind of rigorous studies and evidence-based, because we are lacking them. So I think this is a real important issue.
Thank you so much, Engineer Midhat. So for Amna, one of our participants actually is asking you, how can philanthropists help this movement towards evidence-based policymaking in the MENA region?
I mean, I guess the obvious answer would be to collaborate with JPAL to generate more evidence. And that could be, through obviously financial support that's always needed, but also I think there's room for non-financial support, whether it's, bringing researchers such as the JPAL affiliated researchers into their networks of business partnerships, or some of the work that they do with implementing partners. I think there's a lot of room to donors and funders generally have a lot of room to encourage and encourage more rigorous evaluations. I think evaluations have become a core part of a lot of the development work that we see internationally, but it's not always the most rigorous. Sometimes it's more just to tick a box for the funders, and I think funders can play a big role to shift a little bit that power dynamic and really encourage more rigorous evidence that actually helps supports decision making, and not just tick a box. So I think that would be my 2 cents on this.
Thank you so much, Amna, for that. And we're really hoping that more and more philanthropists will be interest in supporting JPAL MENA and to do more work to help other people. So Adam, one of our participants actually is asking you, what would you think the most useful, interesting research questions that JPAL should be thinking about coming off COVID-19? And how can we develop those questions in a way so that the answers are applicable to the future health crisis?
That's a great question, thanks. It's difficult, of course. I think a lot of the best questions come from interacting with local organizations who are on the ground, who really have local knowledge that is not available usually to, you know, professors who or researchers who are not as in touch with what's going on. And so, you know, the best questions I think to answer are the ones that are coming from you know, field workers are coming from practitioners. And so that's why it's really important to, you know, build these local relationships so that we can identify opportunities that can, you know, help the local community and then also be generalizable for global communities. And so I think COVID is going to be one of those things that is always changing, and from week to week it feels different. And so there'll be lots of different questions that we'll be trying to cover and explore in the coming years.
Thank you so much, Adam. That's very helpful. I would like just also to apologize for taking longer than expected. We still have a lot of questions, but we'll do our best to direct your questions to our panelists and to send you the answer by over the email if possible. Thank you so much for your time and for being available for our webinar today. And this is the end of our webinar. Thank you so much all.